What's going on, guys? This week we talk about the 3 new team policy resolutions that are up for a vote in Stoa. We talk about why the board chose these resolutions, what they mean, and we talk about some of our opinions on them, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Stay tuned, guys. We got a lot to talk about this week. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions along with Steven and Elijah, like how do we record an episode? How do we get it onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify or all those platforms that everyone's always talking about? And the answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. Guys, in our experience with Anchor, we're pretty new to it, but it's really been fantastic. We have started off, we have gotten our podcast already admitted onto platforms, and really the best part is that Anchor is doing all the work for us. We just signed up, we gave them our information and our files that we wanted uploaded, and they did all the rest for us. It's super easy, and they'll even pay you to get started. I can't say enough, guys. If you want to get started with podcasting, go to anchor.fm/start. Again, that's anchor.fm/start. That is not .com, that's not .org. That's anchor.fm/start. Check it out today. We can't wait to hear what you've done with this awesome podcasting platform. Check it out, guys, and let us know. Hey, what's up, guys? So this week we're here on the show talking about the new resolutions that just got put up for vote by the Stoa board. So there's 3 resolutions. This is team policy debate we're talking about, not LD or any of the other options. But Elijah, do you wanna start off, or do you want me to?
Well, I got a few announcements first. Thanks for all the listeners. This is our 10th episode so far. The journey has been great. I'm going to repeat our challenge, guys. We're collecting words. Send us your favorite word, excluding obscenities, of course, to us on Instagram or Facebook at Team Policy Podcast, or email us at teampolicypodcast@gmail.com, and we will have to use them in at least one speech at the next tournament. This should end up with some fun results. So you guys send us your words through social media or through the email, and we've already collected one so far. And we each have to pick a word, and we have to smuggle that word into our speech, no matter how hard that word may be. And then secondly, we're accepting guest speakers. So if you have something interesting to talk about, feel free to shoot us an email, and we'll consider having you on. So Christian, we're going into the resolutions. I believe Stoa is putting out the new resolutions, and this applies not only to Stoa but to CC of SC members, correct? Because CC of SC just runs off of whatever Stoa resolutions there are, right?
Yes, that's correct. CC of SC actually originally had its own resolution. We had a source book written for our league specifically, and then we actually later adopted the Stoa resolution. In fact, I just learned recently that there's actually more than one CCFSE or Christian Communicators League. Just a side tangent, there's actually a Christian Communicators of Tennessee and a Christian Communicators of America, both located in different regions of the United States, obviously. And we are Christian Communicators of the Southeast, but we, unlike our other leagues, now use the Stoa resolution. So, yes.
That's pretty fancy. Okay, so we're going into the new resolutions. You want to hit us off with the first one?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So the first resolution, and we're going to break down all 3 of these, is resolved that the United States federal government should substantially reform its banking, finance, and or monetary policy. And then the the board writes as a description underneath it, and I quote, "Ever since the 2008 recession, banking, finance, and monetary policy have been hot topics. While Stoa debaters have been able to debate fiscal and tax policies in the past, this is a completely different side of the money debate. The Federal Reserve, regulations on banks, the stock market, and housing loans are all areas students will get to explore. Not only will debaters dig deeper into understanding the causes of the 2008 recession, but they will also learn about the Great Depression, the basics of banking and investing, and will study economic concepts like inflation. Cases could range from repealing the Dodd-Frank Act to winding down Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to auditing the Fed and regulating cryptocurrencies, dealing with money laundering and FDIC reform. Challenging? We think so, but don't worry. There are plenty of simple and accessible cases too, like eliminating the penny." End quote. So ultimately, guys, that's a lot. I'm gonna let you go first because I feel like you have a lot to talk about with this.
Yeah,
Elijah.
monetary policy is really something I like a lot. I don't know why. I especially find the 2008 recession really interesting. So the reason that the 2008 recession happened was because the government basically said to banks, if you fail, we'll bail you out no matter what. If people start not paying you back en masse, then we'll pay it all back. And so there was an artificial trust in the market because the government was just going to pay for it all. When Lehman Brothers went down, this was the only time that the U.S. government said, no, sorry, we don't have the funds right now. We're not going to bail you out. And then when all the other investors saw that Lehman Brothers went down and our government didn't bail them out, as they usually do, trust plummeted. So we had all the inflated prices go down because there was no longer a trust held up by the United States government. That would be the most logical. That would be the best case, I think, to run, to just stop having the government fund and bail big banks like that. And they do kind of the same thing with student loans. I don't know if you can apply it under the resolution, but that would be interesting if you could stop funding student loans. It's the same thing where the colleges give out more because they know somebody will pay for them.
Arguably, you could kind of do that under finance, possibly.
Yeah. This is actually my favorite resolution, just looking at the list. If I go to NITALK, I will definitely vote for number 1, just because I like that kind of stuff.
Definitely. I agree 100% with you. Elijah, I think this is the best resolution. I think it's the broadest resolution, which I think is good. I think this year the resolutions become a little bit too constrained because while foreign aid is definitely not a small or lightweight topic, a lot of it's just so insignificant that nobody wants to debate, 2/3 of it. So that's why we've seen so many food aid cases, which frankly, as someone who's debated a food aid case, I'm really tired of hearing food aid cases. And I've heard a lot of other people echo those same sentiments.
Yeah, food aid can die in a hole.
Absolutely. So I think this is a really good sort of differentiation from what we're currently doing and what we've done for, well, I don't know about the past few years. I feel like there's been some broad stuff. Like several years ago, we had a resolution with trade policy with multiple countries, and that was a really good one because it was so broad. I think this would be similar.
Now, last year you had transportation policy, and wasn't that a little bit of a boring year?
It was, I think, somewhat boring. A lot of people, I don't know if everyone shared my opinion on that. I felt like it was kind of dull because a lot of it was just very mundane technical stuff that really, it didn't, even though it did have an immediate impact on our lives, it didn't feel like it did. Because, roads just feel like a given. It just feels like you have roads, or, maybe you have not so great roads, but you still have roads, and that just felt like all we were debating.
Yeah.
This resolution is pretty unique, though, in that it has not just lots of depth, but it has lots of complexity as well. So, I don't know. All in all, I think it's it's a great resolution.
Yeah, it is. Let's see, what's the second resolution? Okay, I'll read it out loud. The United States federal government should substantially reform one or more of the laws administered by the Department of Labor. They say under it, labor is an area ripe for debate. These policies affect every person in the workforce and are the policies that debaters are most likely to interact with after they graduate college. This topic will challenge students to understand both the economic and social implications of employment in the United States. Students will learn a great deal about the history of labor in our country, including the Industrial Revolution, the political impact of labor unions, and more. Affirmatives will have a wide variety of plan options available, including abolishing the federal minimum wage, abolishing the Davis-Bacon Act, reforming unemployment insurance, dealing with parental leave, changing hiring regulations like credit check barns, and removing the convicted of a felony box from job applications, collective bargaining reform, relaxing child labor laws, and adjusting standards for migrant workers. So we have a bunch of different things to go over here. Like, those are just examples of cases that would be run. I really like the idea of abolishing the federal minimum wage, just personally, because it closes out actually a lot of workers. Like back in the day, you wouldn't have to pump gas. There'd be like a teenager sitting there, and then he'd pump your gas. But now the $7.25 closes you out because they can't afford to pay a kid $7.25 an hour to do that job. They might be able to afford to pay him $4 or $5, but because they're unable to pay, then they get closed out of the market. You can argue, of course, that that's not enough, but I mean, if the kid is willing to work for $4 or $5 an hour, why should we restrict him from doing that?
Right. I agree with you on the minimum wage aspect. Just from a political principle matter, I won't get into too much depth on that because I don't think that's fitting for this podcast. However, on the flip side, though, since we're talking about labor policy, there's definitely the argument that some people will bring up that a kid, even if it's a kid working that rate, because realistically, only very young people or just very poor people would be willing to work for that sort of pay in the United States. In conditions like that, where it's a job like pumping gas, you're going to hear people talking about, well, exposing young people or very poor people, vulnerable people, they'll say, to gasoline and to chemicals like that are associated with various cancers or various negative effects on the human body over long-term exposure to those things could be problematic. That could be a labor rights, workers' rights, or workers' protection issue that could come up. Should they have safety gear? Should they be exposed for long periods of time to those things like gasoline, diesel fuels, things that if you inhale the fumes from them over long periods of time, even if it's not like not like carbon monoxide poisoning or something like that, but if you're exposed to them for long periods of time, you're at a higher risk of developing cancers. So
I see what you mean.
That's also a flip side argument, not necessarily relating to the minimum wage, but when we deal with labor policy, you get into a lot of depth there. So it is limited to the Department of Labor. So that will constrict things a lot, which I think is one of the issues with it. But it's a very, very interesting discussion, I think.
I think this would be my second favorite resolution.
I agree.
Because it's still pretty broad. I mean, you can have two. Basically, there's two extremes you can advocate for, like socialism or capitalism. And if you're advocating for socialistic policies through the Department of Labor, you'd require that employees pay more health insurance or provide more benefits or things like that. Or if you're going capitalistic, you would say no minimum wage, no collective. Well, I guess it depends on what kind of capitalist you are regarding collective bargaining and things like that. Less controls on the labor market, I would suppose. So that would be a fun resolution. I think let's move into resolution 3. And Christian, how about you lead us into this? I know there's some controversy regarding resolution 3.
Oh my goodness. So Resolution 3, the United States federal government should substantially reform its policy regarding veterans. And this is the follow-up description. How the federal government treats those who serve our country is of the utmost importance, and the Department of Veterans Affairs is woefully underperforming in this task. This is a pressing and relevant issue, especially in light of continued foreign wars and increasing numbers of veterans. Debaters would be educated on the very real physical, emotional, and financial burdens borne by our nation's warriors. Plenty of cases could be debated, including allowing lawsuits of VA doctors, VA hospital privatization, increasing military pay, providing healthcare premium support or vouchers, increasing VA accountability and oversight, improving job placement programs, combating homelessness, and addressing overmedication and PTSD. Now, that's a lot to unpack, but
Yeah.
let me just say, I hold this opinion. Many other, with the exception of one person, basically every Stoa or CCFSE debater I've talked to shares this opinion. There's been a whole movement raised about this opinion on social media, a campaign really, to stop this resolution. Elijah, I don't know where you stand on this. My personal debate partner actually would probably enjoy this a little bit. Steven, again, is out of town this week, so he won't be able to join us for this episode. So he hasn't probably seen this yet, but he would probably enjoy this, although I feel like he would also share some of the concerns that this resolution is, in a way, too limiting, just on the debate side of things, and then far too emotionally and just from a preconceived thought point of view, it's far too skewed in terms of bias to the affirmative team. Everyone agrees that things need to be done differently with regard to veterans. Everyone agrees that we need to take better care of our veterans, that they deserve good treatment. Everyone agrees that there's problems in it and that they're not going away. And everyone agrees that the government has done a terrible job of it time and time again. So everyone already agrees on some of the most important fundamental premises that an affirmative would need to prove in order to support change in this. So therefore, you're going to have a lot of people just really easily convinced on affirmative, just before the affirmative even opens their mouth willing to vote affirmative, basically. And then a negative debate sort of things in that camp, you have debaters who are thinking, well, there's going to be a lot of cases that are just emotionally based, and if I argue against that, I look like, I don't support veterans. Or if it's not one of those cases, if it's actually a really solid case, really well argued case that's almost indefeatable, then I have no way to effectively beat that case because everyone agrees that there's a lot of problems and there's probably a lot of common sense reforms that could be done right now that would make it better. There's actually a debate blog. I think it's called Ace Peak or Ace's Peak. I haven't personally looked into it, but it's a group that sells debate briefs and things like that. And they write advising material on certain debate stuff. And they actually put out a blog post about this resolution and cited the rising concerns by debaters against this resolution. And they said, well, there's a lot of solvency arguments that could be made. And I will say that is true, and that's a good point. However, as has been stated by some of my fellow debaters, solvency arguments are going to do nothing against cases that rely on the basis that we don't have to solve the issue, we only have to make it better. So comparative advantage cases that are going to be really strong this year, or under this resolution, they would be. And other cases that limit their harms or constrict them in a way so that it's easy to solve them, those cases are going to be basically bulletproof. And whenever you have such a skewed bias among 90% of people towards the belief that is presented by this resolution, then it's going to be very hard to go negative. And even going affirmative, it's going to get dull pretty quickly, I think, because, again, you're going to have a lot of cases, I think, that are very emotionally skewed, and then a handful of cases that are really, really good, and there's going to be almost no way to argue against them. That's my thought. Elijah, what do you think about this? I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, kind of what you said about the lack of... Okay, so to be clear, for the last thing, I said there's two extremes, capitalism and socialism. Socialism is the control of the market by the government, so it wouldn't be exactly applicable. I want to be precise in my speech. What I'm saying is a difference between right and left extremes. Now, it's more applicable, what I said, capitalist and socialist right here with this resolution. So, like, capitalist would be like turning it over to privatization, or socialist would be increasing the pay of these doctors, or just making it more government run, making it a big government basically. So so those are the two extremes I think will be argued in both of these. But the thing is, in the first two, we have a lot more room for cases. So first one about monetary policy, super wide. Super wide. We'll have an abundance of cases throughout the entire year. Second, a little bit less wide. A little bit less wide. But there's still a lot of different cases that could come up. But the third one, policies regarding only veterans, is really, I believe that it'll be like half the year, and everybody will be making cool cases, and then the other half we just have to sit through as we hear the same case over and over and over again, because it's kind of just a small definition. Or it's not very wide encompassing definition. Resolution. I actually agree mostly with that movement. I believe that the first one is the best. Second one, like, we have a slowly getting worse down the flow.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say 3, definitely not.
Yeah.
1 and 2, I don't care too much. I'd prefer 1 though. 1 would be super cool.
Right. I agree. I would actually, just as sort of I don't know if it's a closing thought necessarily, because I think if there's anything to rant about on recent podcasts, this resolution will be one. Again, my debate partner might disagree with me, but we'll have him on and let him air his thoughts on it whenever he gets back. But to give perspective as to how broad the distaste for this is, in the past 24 to 48 hours, there has been an Instagram account / campaign started against this resolution, just solely this team policy Stoa resolution. There's a committee against Resolution 3, also known as the Committee for Competitive Debate. They have over 100 followers on Instagram. Their first post has 60 likes and 10 comments. Their second post, 28 likes and 4 comments. I'm looking at it on my computer right now. They were literally started within the past 24 to 48 hours after this came out. And they have a hashtag StopRes3. It is all over the Stoa USA, the official Stoa Instagram account, on their latest post talking about these updates with the new information put out on the resolutions. It's just blasted from different accounts with hashtag StopRes3. Multiple accounts. Our Instagram account, Team Policy Podcast, has actually joined in this movement to campaign against this resolution, because really, I mean, I think it's a good topic for debate in a sense. And in that sense, I mean political debate or private debate. We should have conversations about how we can fix this issue. I don't want to make it sound like we're unsympathetic to veterans or to the issues with the healthcare system or things like that. That's a really important thing. But for team policy debate, where we have to debate policy proposals, affirmative, negative, back and forth for a year on end, this one subject, I think, is too limited in some sense, maybe too broad in another sense. I don't know. And ultimately, it's just too biased towards one perspective, because just everyone agrees we do need to reform it. So I will leave my thoughts there on it. But in closing, on all 3 of these resolutions, is there anything that you'd like to add? I think they're all interesting resolutions, all good subjects for debate, just not necessarily all subjects for team policy. What do you think, Elijah?
Yeah, I definitely not. No to 3. It's a fine resolution. I don't think it can be sustained throughout the entire year, though. I think that I think that the best one is Resolution 1. The United States federal government should substantially reform its banking, finance, and or monetary policy. That would be so much fun, I think.
I agree. Lastly, just before we close, I think it's important to add, I think most of this is straightforward, but since we have talked about one quite a bit, what, in your opinion, Elijah, because I think you're probably, if not, you're probably more experienced on this stuff than I am, just because you're very interested in it. How would you define some of these things like banking policy, finance policy, monetary policy? What would that encompass for those of whom are listening to this and maybe haven't taken macroeconomics yet and just don't know as much about this? How would you explain it?
Finance policy. So I would include however we spend our money and who it goes to. So one of my cases is the IMF case. That would be included. I could actually run it in this definition because it's actually through the U.S. Department of the Treasury, and they give our moolah to the IMF, who then gives it to other countries. But what it is, monetary policy, anything we do with our cash transfers, so we could let any legislation on the current banking system, finance system, or monetary system, including cryptocurrencies, as I said there, any of those limits or pulling away limits to those industries, and then also how we spend our own government money. I'd probably think most of the cases would pertain to the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Yeah, and that's where I think they'll probably go. It'll be either internal or external. Internal would be what we do in our government, and external would be regulating the banks and such.
Very cool. Last note I will add on that is I think having cases on cryptocurrency is both a terrible and a really interesting idea at the same time. I think that'll be interesting. Anyway, guys, those 3 resolutions are available for those of whom want to see them at stoausa.org/spring-member-vote 2019. There's a dash between all that. So again, that's stoausa.org/spring-member-vote 2019. You can check it out on Stoa's website, and you can also check it out on the Team Policy Podcast Instagram page at Team Policy Podcast. We have all the information there for you to see. So anyway, guys, let us know on Instagram or via email or via Facebook which of these you love or hate and why. And we'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, be sure and send us your words for us to say at our next tournament here in North Carolina to discuss or to just throw into our speech or debate runs just for fun and see how that goes. Anyway, guys, it's been a blast.
Yep.
I think this is a very interesting set of discussion. So I will leave it there, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.